Wind. It comes into play on every single shot. Unless, of course, there's no wind, but how often does that really happen? In this video, I'm going to show you some simple tricks on how to navigate the wind in PGA Tour 2K21 and become a better golfer. First off, where is it? It's going to be located at the top of your screen. It's going to have a numerical value. It is going to have a directional compass point as well and a meter. You will notice on most societies, as I said, it will have a numerical value. If it does not, which some cases it doesn't, the wind setting will be on and the difficulty will be meter only. You'll be left with this. It doesn't say the direction, it doesn't say anything. Your best bet is to do what a lot of people do. Turn this marker sideways, directionally like this, so it is completely horizontal, the arrow. And I am doing this by zooming in and then using the right stick to turn. When it is horizontal, you can kind of easily see if it's half full or not. Half full is about 12 to 13 miles an hour, so that's a good way of calculating. Highly recommend to do that. So, what do we do with all this data though? Yeah, we might know that this is about 8-9 miles an hour, and we have a little bit of a tailwind. More of a tailwind if I'm aiming straight. What do we do next? First off, let's explain a couple things. One, the longer the ball is in the air, the more the wind will impact it. Think about it. If I just throw a ball up in the air and try to catch it in my hand and it's 20 miles an hour wind outside, it's probably going to go right back in my hand. Now, if I throw it up and I throw it 50 yards, God forbid I can actually do that, it might affect it a little bit more. If it's going 300 yards, I think it's going to affect it a heck of a lot more. So, the longer your shot, the more the wind is going to impact it. And another thing to consider, this is all on level elevation. We can get into this more next week on the elevation video, which I would recommend watching next. The lower your elevation, the ball is going to be in the air longer. If you are going uphill, it is not going to stay in the air as long. So the longer time duration the ball is in the air, the more the wind will affect it. So always keep that in mind. Those are very important concepts and are the most important thing about wind. If you can understand that, you can kind of gauge and feel the rest. But let's go into further detail. Let's go back to the game. All right. So here we're looking at about 10 mile an hour wind, okay? So I have aimed over in this portion specifically so we can see a direct tailwind and how it's going to affect it. If it is at an angle further over, it's not going to help it as much as a direct tailwind. Now, my driver naturally carries 296 yards. If I go to the settings and go to difficulty, you can turn Pro Vision Wind on. Remember, it is 10 mile an hour tailwind. This is now going to display how long this ball is going to carry. So instead of 296, it'll carry 312. So that is a net of 16 yards extra for 10 mile an hour wind. Now if I go to a 7 iron, a 153 is going to carry 162 yards. Now keep in mind this is also down elevation here, so it does come into play. And as I go shorter, a sand wedge is going to get 7 extra yards. So as you see, the closer you get, the less the ball is in the air, the less distance it's going to gain. Now the same would be true if you are to inverse this and you are to hit into a headwind. Let's take a look at that. Now we have a 13 mile an hour headwind. And I've gone to TPC Boston where it's relatively a flat fairway all the way from tee box to green. As you can see, there's barely any elevation change. 14 now, so it's changing a little bit. The direction shouldn't change all too much. Now, if I go to settings and go to difficulty and turn that Pro Wind on, so it's going to do the calculations for me, and I am now on my driver. My 296 driver is only going to carry 271 yards into this 14 mile an hour headwind. So that's a loss of 25 yards. As I go to like a 5 iron, the 176 is going to carry 157. Quick math, that's going to be 19 yards less. So as you see, the closer you are, the shorter the distance the club is, the less the wind is going to affect it. Pitching wedge, for example, is going to be about 20 yards. Now, what are we going to do with all this data? Let's take a look at the breakdown here. I have 5, 10, and 15 mile an hour headwinds. One thing that a lot of people like to use is about 1 for 1, as in 1 mile per hour for 1 yard lost of carry for each club. That can be deceiving. That is roughly true, as you can see for lob wedge here, as it's about 5 yards lost, 10, 11 yards, and 17 yards lost for 5, 10, and 15 mile an hour winds respectively. As you go up the ladder though, the wind does play a little bit more, and as you go to a higher mile per hour wind, it also increases. So you can use this 1-to-1 ratio as a rough estimate, but like I said at the beginning of the video, the longer the ball's in the air, the more the wind's going to affect it. Now for tailwinds, it's about the same. Every 5 mile an hour, it's going to be about 4 to 5 yards gained on a wedge, but as the ball is in the air longer, it's going to gain a little bit extra yardage. Use these data points. Hopefully this is going to make you a better golfer in PGA Tour 2K21. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them, drop them in the comments below, or catch me live on Twitch every 6:30 Eastern where I play my competitive tour rounds. Till next week, where we break down elevation.